Hi, I'm Shard. Some of you may know me as Weedcat, or you may know me from other active social media platforms. Others don't know me at all, and I have a belief that whatever I put up on screen to represent me is not a cause for discrediting what my arguments will be here today. That being said, if you wish to say that my arguments are invalid because of the avatar you see on screen, then please head to your nearest exit and watch out for the meat grinder on the way out. Also, please do not go out of your way to send hate or harassment to anyone featured in this video. Let's be the bigger humans here and just dunk on them today here in this video. Now, this sort of thing has come to my attention solely for the fact that a loud group, and I mean loud, seem to be getting off on creating a narrative that seems to throw one group under the bus while also propping up a major problematic mindset and terrible critical thinking skills.
The left don't know how to have fun.
So which side did the left choose to back in the human versus bug war?
Do they welcome our insect overlords?
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
As you might expect.
They literally use the term managed democracy in here. So if anything, the most this could be said to be making fun of is America spreading trans rights across the world.
Dude, seriously, you're like a million years old.
I know people like to put those who are older with more experience up on a pedestal when talking about subjects in media, claiming that those said individuals are more knowledgeable on the topic at hand. However, I don't think that's the case that works best here. You see, these are men looking to spin a narrative, slandering those who are appreciative of two pieces of media in favor of calling them the problem when regarding the topics, such as the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, and our main topic of contention today, the Archcast. We'll be getting into a deeper discussion on one of these individuals later on in the video. However, I'd like to address a couple things before getting into it. Or, well, a few, more like. For one, both channels are under the notion that people are media illiterate, and that a large majority of people have failed the media literacy test when it comes to the discussion of the film Starship Troopers. A film that is vastly different from that of the novel simply for the fact that the novel was made to show humanity's military in a more sci-fi futuristic aesthetic, compared to the film that's a more high school drama, war between species, political statement kind of take on the story. Though when it comes to the point of view between these two, they feel the need to bring in the novel, failing to understand the concept of adaptation as well as the process the film took in order for it to be made.
But whatever you do, don't read the original Henline novel.
No.
Whatever you do, don't do that. Okay.
No, because you're not a fascist, are you, Bo? You wouldn't read fascist literature, would you, Bo? That would be verboten. Satire is something we often hear about, but most of the time you then look at the product, the media product that you're supposed to be insulted by, and you go, well, if it is trying to insult me, it's not doing a particularly good job of it. Paul Verhoeven had decided not to read the book that it was based on and went, people love their country and are willing to fight for it, this must be fascism.
The film at first wasn't intentionally supposed to be a Starship Troopers film. It was supposed to be its own independent take. However, due to marketing or pitching, they had to slap in Starship Troopers as the title and sort of try to adapt the original novel, at least in some aspects of it. As a result, we have a movie that is a satire on a fascist regime hidden under a thin layer of democracy that's fighting bugs, while a young boy discovers what he's fighting for during his time in the military, which goes from fighting for love to fighting for humanity under said fascist regime. This film was beloved by all, after a few years of this movie being a box office flop, being loved by a wide majority who come together to laugh and understand the themes while enjoying the action and horrors that come with the film. Though these guys like to take that as liberals are stupid because they hate things that are fascists, like the movie that they claim is fascistic, which is a stupid argument considering that this is not a movie that promotes fascism, but is rather a satirical commentary on it mixed in with bug killing and practical effects. And it's all just fun, though these guys don't seem to grasp what the satire is about either. They seem to have created a non-issue within the discussion of this movie, thinking that the satire is mostly on the democracy side of things. All because these people who don't share their point of view can spot the inner themes of a film. And they didn't even read the book, they just watched the film. These guys also perceive the idea of fascism to be totally in line with that of Mussolini, Stalin, or the fucking mustache guy himself. They seem to compare those regimes to the film's regime and try to see if they could find a one-for-one for it and not really look into it any further than that. because to them, that's all fascism is. It's not like a new form of it can pop up in any other way under the guise of any other form of government.
Fascist, multiracial, multi-ethnic family, which is not what I remember Mussolini and Hitler advocating for.
They've also gone out of the way to poorly discredit the director as well, saying things such as, "He knows nothing of fascism," which is insensitive and is a baseless claim, as the man himself, Paul Verhoeven, lived under the Nazi regime as a child. They also want to discredit Verhoeven's work by telling people not to listen to him on what the movie means.
Watch a video essay from a leftist who read some interviews so he can tell you what to think by proxy.
Incidentally, the creator of the movie has no actual conceptualization of Nazism or fascism.
Paul Verhoeven had decided not to read the book that it was based on and went, people love their country and are willing to fight for it, this must be fascism.
To an extent, I understand that argument, as the author's intent on a piece of media could be shaky at times, and we could find other meanings that differ from the original theme. However, in this case, it is made blatantly obvious that the Terran Federation is actually a fascistic regime that is under the thin veil of a democracy. The audience doesn't go to Verhoeven as a messiah on what to think of the movie. It gives us some insight on the author's intent to see if the film actually holds up to what he intended. And I think that a large majority of people can understand and see that it really does, if not cartoonishly well. Now then, one last thing I'd like to touch up on is why I would cover a video titled Cinema Wins Does Not Understand Starship Troopers, the media literacy test in a Helldivers 2 world, made by our subject here, Archcast. Well, it's simple. It's because it's a video that tries so desperately to push a narrative to prop up his own baseless arguments on a pedestal to feed his own ego or something. His reasons as to why he would misrepresent and lie throughout this video is beyond me, though it is a video that I think promotes the wrong kind of thinking. In fact, the video promotes quite the opposite of what Arch himself is trying to promote against, becoming a media illiterate himself and not understanding the underlying concepts presented here. And he overall presents arguments and ideals that are just overall terrible, wrong, and just an English teacher's worst nightmare. That's why I'm going through with making this video. Not to defend Cinema Wins and be their white knight in silver armor, but to show the audience how wrong of a video this is, to the point where my skin crawled at the hearing of logical fallacies and blatant misrepresentations. And if you haven't already, by all means, go watch the original Cinema Wins video, compare and contrast to the things that Arch has said in this video. He's actually left out quite a bit of it, and has misrepresented a lot of the things that Cinema Wins has presented in their own video. I'm just going to say this right now, Archcast's video is a failure on media literacy as well as visual storytelling. But I'll stop yapping. We'll get into the reasons why later in the video, so for now just sit back and enjoy the show.
Greetings and salutations, friends. It is time to defend Starship Troopers again. The movie that has become the ultimate benchmark for media literacy that no one seemingly is capable of actually clearing.
We are 16 seconds in, and already this is a bold statement to make. You meant to say since 1997, when the movie was first released, that no one understands the film whatsoever. We have had 27 years, and our vast knowledge of information of history, as well as our modern political climate, has changed over the course of more than 2 decades. And yet, no one has seemed to have cracked the code on a movie, despite the director's input on his vision, despite the numerous think pieces on it, and despite the amount of criticism that it has received over the years that sort of support the message of the movie. That's one hell of a bold claim to make, sir, but dare I say, it is an interesting one. Please, shower me with your knowledge, my good sir. I am so ready to hear it.
As the Terran Federation is not a fascist state by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, it is the exact opposite of a fascist state in nearly every way. It is an extremely libertarian state that rests near exclusively on personal responsibility and a minimalistic government.
A libertarian government. That is an interesting take, my good sir. But by all sense of the word, let's look into the definition of libertarianism, shall we? Now, I'm about to read Wikipedia to you, so if your name is H. Bomber Guy, I will cite my source in the description below. Libertarianism is a political philosophy that upholds liberty as a core value. Libertarians seek to maximize autonomy and political freedom, emphasizing equality before the law, civil rights to freedom of association, freedom of speech, freedom of thought, and freedom of choice. Hey, that's actually pretty cool. I love liberty, and I do think that everyone should get equal rights under the governing hand that they live under. All men should be created equal. But what do Starship Troopers have to say about that?
You. Why are only citizens allowed to vote?
They're doing their part. Are you? Join the mobile infantry and save the world. Service guarantees citizenship.
And right off the bat, we have a differing class system put under the Federation, where citizens have more rights than civilians simply by the fact that they can vote. The most democratic country in the world, also known as the United States of God Bless America, will give you those rights whether you have served or not. Of course, you need to be a citizen under the American flag, which can be obtained in a number of ways. You can be born on American soil, you can obtain a visa if you are an immigrant, at least one of your parents will have to be a US citizen themselves, and so on and so forth. I'm not going to list them all because we'll be here for a long time. You can do your research by yourself, but the point is that you can be born into citizenship without having to serve one day for your government. Meanwhile, in the Terran Federation, you must work for it by serving time to your local military. Only 37 seconds in and I'm already pulling out the dictionary. Oh boy, this one's gonna be one hell of a video.
Okay, full disclosure, I saw this around 14, 15 years old, and I had no idea this was a satire about a fascist society, so weirdly funny moments like this really threw me, and I just thought, ha, cute, not, oh, that's dark.
So this is obviously Paul Verhoeven referencing the Hitler Youth, one of the more famous and nasty aspects of the Nazi Reich. Incidentally, the creator of the movie has no actual conceptualization of Nazism or fascism and uses the two words interchangeably, but details. That just makes him 98% of the general populace, so we shan't harp on that too much.
I would like to take a moment to talk about how Paul Verhoeven lived next to a German military base as a child in the Netherlands during World War II. To say that the man knows nothing about fascism would be kinda insensitive to say, considering he lived under the regime. I'm not saying that Verhoeven's feelings are gonna be hurt or anything. I'm not trying to protect no big corporation or company or whatever the fuck, or some big-name millionaire or whatever the fuck. But I am saying that this is one poor way of discrediting someone for the sake of your own narrative. Side note, when doing research for this part, I actually discovered that back in the day, this movie was once received critically bad. And that's because people realized they were cheering on terrible people under what they thought was totalitarian at the time, believe it or not. Like, listen to this review that was saved by the lovely Leia Singer from Digital Spy. Link in the description. Exactly like Star Wars, if you subtract a good story, sympathetic characters, intelligence, wit, and moral purpose. Brought to you by the Washington Post. If Star Wars is humanist, Starship Troopers is totalitarian. From critical guru Roger Eberts. Cheerfully lobotomized. LA Times. That one doesn't prove my point, I just think that's funny. Damn, that's fucking crazy. Off topic, but it's crazy to read up on that. Man, doing research is actually pretty fun. But yeah, this old man that made the bloody movie most likely knew what he was talking about with his background and knowledge of it, as well as the amount of records that we have of it, especially during the 90s.
The Terran Federation has no equivalent to a Hitler Youth. In fact, you cannot sign up for federal service until you are of age. You are forbidden to do so. This is one of relatively few absolute and strict laws within the Terran Federation. Yet at the same time, when you are of age, there is absolutely nothing the Terran Federation can do to stop you from signing up, unless the psychiatrist literally determines that you are incapable of understanding the oath you are about to give. Incidentally, I will be combining both the books and the movies here, as the reviewer does mention having read the book, which I kind of doubt, but we are going to work off both of them here.
Okay, so there's a couple more things here we should take note of. Specifically, that this scene in particular is a bit more than a reference to the Hitler Youth in the form of propaganda. No child under the age of enlistment ever gets put into the battlefield in the movie, as this ad was meant to be, like I said, propaganda. However, this piece of propaganda shows how everyone is pulling their weight in the tides of battle amongst the stars, and it does not discriminate against anyone in terms of audience. Not men, not women, and especially not children. In fact, Children in wars of the past were also appealed to in order to prepare the next generation of new soldiers ready to enlist, to encourage them to do their parts in both the world wars. Both of them. There's this amazing little, I'd say, mini documentary from Ross F. Collins going over the subject. If you would like to know more of the nature of propaganda aimed towards children and adults named Children, War, and Propaganda, link in the description below. All this propaganda is essentially the country grooming children into believing that war is a good place for them to contribute to society.
But in America, authorities of all kinds wanted to persuade children that war was not such a bad thing. Children might see the value of becoming a volunteer for a cause larger than themselves. It could encourage habits of fitness, of study, of loyalty and obedience. War could build a boy, or maybe even a girl, into an adult of integrity. War could make good citizens. But it could not encourage habits of free thought, or tolerance, or peaceful solutions to difficult problems.
One more thing here as well. Arch states here that he will be going off from the books alongside the movie too. Not a bad idea, so long as you don't try to act like the book and the movie are both interchangeable in the universe and themes. The movie is not an extension of the book, the movie is an adaptation of the book. It shares story beats and maybe some characters, but in terms of themes and probably other things as well, you know, they're just not the same. Whatever information or events that appeared in the book is not really something that we should be expected to see in the movie. After all, a lot of people mostly watched the movie and haven't even read the book. So to bring things from the movie in context of the book makes you look like one of those fanboys that thinks that, you know, the movie has to be one for one with the book, and that the book is like the book is the Bible of the movie or whatever the fuck. You have to treat both as separate media in their own right. So I hope Arch can understand and stay consistent with that. Look familiar? Scenes like this are happening all around the internet, and I don't know why these old men like to do this, but for some reason they love to bring in the book, which is honestly very stupid and irrelevant to the argument of the film.
Oh, Ender style being the goal, just without any of that pesky remorse.
Credit that is, however, swiftly wiped out by this comparison, which isn't so much apples to oranges as it's donkeys to spaceships. As the example given here of the Formic from Ender's Game is either believement or malicious against the Formic. Rocks are not living beings. In Ender's Game, therefore, the war is an unfortunate accident caused by a galactic misunderstanding. In Starship Troopers, there is no misunderstanding. The arachnids know we're intelligent. They literally suck our brains out. They are not trying to eradicate humanity for some accident. They are an aggressive expansionist species that views humanity as getting in the way of their manifest destiny.
You know, I was actually on board with Arch here for a bit. I never read Ender's Game, nor do I remember much of the movie, but I could kinda understand his point of view here, up until he talks about the expansion of the arachnids' manifest destiny. You see, the arachnids here are in fact somewhat intelligent, and if you watch Starship Troopers, you can see that their intelligence shine through their battle tactics and show of emotion by the end. But overall, they're just a sort of intelligent wildlife. These bugs live in a hole and can manage incredible feats such as shooting plasma into space as a means of self-defense. But in no way, shape, or form have these bugs ever shown signs of being able to interdimensionally travel. If anything, humans are the ones who import them, who capture them in order to perform studies and tests on. Why that is would start to put me in a big old conspiracy theory mode. They've mostly been able to spread out their spores across their own solar system.
They can colonize planets by hurling their spore into space.
Okay, I think we got it.
As you can see by this image right here, this is the Klendathu solar system, and you can see that the planet Klendathu and Planet P, the other planet that this movie takes place on, are actually relatively close to each other. We have not seen any form of bug species or life forms outside of this solar system, and those scenes where the humans have bug specimens do not count, as we have imported them to our planets ourselves. Who knows, maybe it's like Helldivers, where the spores are let loose to inhabit other planets for the bug population to increase so that Super can harvest the innards for oil.
There appears to be no indication that any sort of diplomatic interaction with the bugs is even possible, as they were the ones that initiated hostilities, choosing actively and knowingly to try and eradicate humanity.
Another thing, to say that the bugs were the aggressors here in the first place is a huge stretch in the context of the movie if we're going by the meteor argument. That thing has been lost in space for light years as shown in the digital map. We are on the opposite side of the galaxy. And if we really wanted to go to war so badly with the arachnids, then why didn't the humans use the slaughtering of the Mormon settlers? Perhaps it is because that the Mormon settlers were on the ground of the arachnids and, you know, it's not really much of a good cause to start a war in the first place because it's not something that has directly happened to any of our inhabitable planets. But whatever, maybe we can brush that aside. They struck first, after all, but why do we have our space military in the first place? It's not like the meteor led to the discovery of the bugs or that the humans had no knowledge of them in the first place. We have specimens of them that the students use to study with. We have veterans who lost limbs from these things and know what's out there. We have settlers that have died on those said planets. But let's continue with the video before I blow my load everywhere first.
But when you start to pay attention, you can hear Ratchek literally say that their society was started via a military coup and ended democracy. It's not subtle.
This is where there's going to be a lot of things wrong, beginning with this, of course. The veterans did not seize power through a military coup. In fact, if you listen to what Ratchek is saying, you will hear that the democracies of the world had already failed. Government had already collapsed. The world was covered in general anarchy after the enormous wars that had happened earlier where the West lost to the East.
Excuse me, sir, but I just watched the very beginning here, and I do not hear anything about how democracy has already collapsed beforehand. In fact, according to our teacher, Ratchek here, the veterans have imposed their government into the society that the Federation abide by in the present day of the film. Also, we haven't gotten any confirmation as to if the East beat the West. Actually, we beat the East, as Hiroshima has still happened, as proven by this clip here.
I wonder what the city fathers of Hiroshima would say about that. You.
They probably wouldn't say anything. Hiroshima was destroyed.
Correct.
There could not have been any military coup by definition because there was no government to launch the coup against. Instead, the veterans began to create various veteran enclaves offering safety and security to people, and these eventually grew into full-blown governments. This is also why I said that I kind of doubt the guy read the book, because this is mentioned.
Oh, okay, so that's how it happened. I see. In the book, my guy, we are talking about the movie here. The movie has events that have happened that are different in terms of context to the book. If the book says that the East have beaten the West, the movie says the West have beaten the East. I stated before that the sole purpose of the video was to discuss the movie, not the books. For liberty's sake, man. The movie is an adaptation of the novels, but they are different in terms of theming. To my understanding, the world of Starship Troopers has people go in giant mechs to fight the bugs, and yet we see none of that within the film as it is. It's all contained in its own world of context and themes. Bringing the book into the discussion of the movie like it's a Star Wars Expanded Universe novel doesn't work here, guy.
When you vote, you are exercising political authority. You're using force. Force, my friends, is violence, the supreme authority from which all other authority is derived.
Fascist says what? That one should be harder to miss, but I also didn't have a working definition of fascism at 13.
And neither, my friend, am I sorry to say, do you have one today. What Ratchek just said there is absolute, unquestionable truth.
Excuse me, sir?
All authority stems from force, from violence.
There's smoke coming from the pot.
To give you a very simple example of this, you can imbue yourself with all the legal power you want. You can write page upon page upon page, millions of miles of paper and books, giving you the absolute moral justification to do something. But if you go up to a person and say, hey, I have given myself all of these authorities to tell you what to do, and that person tells you to go pound dirt, you are still not going to have any way to make that person do what you want him to do unless you pick up a stick and say, or else.
The fucking pot is on fire! Holy shit! Does this man even live in a democracy?
This is the fundament of our entire system. The police force uses authority in that they are capable of wielding force.
Oh my fucking god!
Our legal system is underpinned by the implicit threat of force. If you break a law, force will be used against you to make you abide by the law and suffer the consequences for breaking.
Excuse me, sir, but, that simply is not true in this day and age. As a man who works a normal job and has not gotten a career in the arts of online entertainment, I can safely say that I have employers who do not need to take out the beating stick to tell me what to do. I have incentive to do my job by the legal promise of pay. After all, the legal authorities have cause to shut down the business I work at if they do not pay their employees in full, as do all other businesses. Threats of violence from authorities only derive from instances where aggression and hostility are taking place. For example, a violent mob, a household that's armed and that has threatened violence, or resistance to being arrested. We do not live under threats of violence from our authorities, or at least we aren't supposed to, but that's a whole nother story. The point is that we live under an authority that is supposed to give as much as it takes from the businesses and from the people. Break the speed limit and the police will give you a ticket calmly unless threatened with violence or unless you aren't complying and decide to drive away, which is a show of aggression. The business must make sure that the employees are working with standard safety protocols unless they want to pay a fine from OSHA. Something on a scale that's as small as what Archcast here brings up is not an authority that we live under today. That example there is called slavery. That's all dependent on the law you break. Some cases are handled by force if it ever comes to it. Others aren't handled by force and are handled in the court of law. God, it's such a black and white way of looking at this stuff. How has no one said anything about this video sooner?
Again, no amount of authority, no matter where you claim to derive it from, is worth a single itty-bitty thing unless you can back it up with consequences.
Jaywalker. Oh, come on, man, please. I promise I'll never jaywalk again.
Nah, you'll never walk again. That's so true, but the consequences ain't always brute and physical force.
Figuring things out for yourself is the only freedom anyone really has. Use that freedom. Make up your own mind, Rico.
I mean, that's like genuinely solid advice. Even a fascist cog is right twice a day or whatever.
And we're sticking with Ratchek for a little while longer as he gives some great advice. And Cinema Wins admits that it's great advice. This also should be the moment where the whole "is this truly fascism?" begins to tickle away at the little mind a bit here, and yet it does not. Instead, he simply goes, well, that's a weird thing for a fascist to say, that you have freedom to make your own choices, despite this, of course, being the underpinning of the entire Terran Federation. So, how do we even explain this? How do we explain the idea that so many people look at this movie and think it's fascist, despite Ratchek having, up until this point, not said anything that can be in any way construed as actually fascistic?
Well, he has explained how our government system works in its class system between citizens and civilians, acknowledged the city fathers of Hiroshima have no voice to speak on our political system because they were destroyed, and has taught these high schoolers that violence is a superior factor in running the system rather than diplomacy. He advocates that the sword is mightier than the pen. This scene here is Ratchek reassuring Rico that he has a choice he can make in the system. The only choice, in fact, that anyone has. Stay as a civilian and live his life of luxury as a trust fund kid, unlike other civilians who probably have less, as well as practically no rights at all, or become a citizen that lives to serve his system rather than himself. But it is really good advice to pass down to a person who lives in this world, to make them feel like their direction in life matters, making life meaningful to said individual. Honestly, I'm surprised Cinema Wins didn't pick that up. A good piece of moral philosophy made to serve the system.
The primary problem here is that to far too many modern-day minds, there is no concept of justifiable action. They all live in a hazy, indistinct realm of pure black and white.
Sound familiar? Keep those words in mind for the future.
where the moral or value of a thing or an action is already pre-described to them. They have no need to figure out these values or morals for themselves because they live in the comfortable cocoon of modern-day democracy and society. Thus, a statement as obviously and self-evidently true as violence is the supreme authority comes across as bad.
Well, yeah, it is bad. Do I need to show you unjust cases of police brutality? Because we have lost 1,243 people to our authority, unjustly. I bring this statistic up because it sort of shows how living a life of democracy under the brute fist of authority actually would look like. Because, let's face it, authority would get really high off their own power if they knew that civilians were below the average citizen. And these are cases that could have been prevented. So yeah, no shit is violence as the supreme authority bad. It's oppressive. It's what the main conflict of the Cold War was about. The threat of violence between two countries who had access to devastating weapons of mass destruction.
Why? Because it's told to them by somebody who's a fascist. And why is he a fascist? Well, because the Federation wears fancy uniforms.
Excuse me? That is one head-ass take, my guy.
Literally, that appears to be the sole reason why anyone calls this fascist. The imagery of it. And fascism, of course, is bad. Even despite the fact that, again, the person in question has no conceptualization of what fascism is, or any idea what the ideas of fascism are. All he knows is that fascism is bad, and thus he is confused when the not-at-all fascist teacher that has become a fascist teacher simply by being placed in a movie where he is on the well-dressed side says something that does not jive with his generalistic idea of fascism.
You want to ridicule people for having a black and white viewpoint of a certain subject when you yourself have a black and white view of those people you tend to criticize. Sir, this is an outrage. Grinding my gears, if you will. And not only is it a terrible discrediting of so many points, it is an insult to the art of imagery you are talking about. This is an example of your media illiteracy. The scene takes place at a school dance. The well-dressed fascists don't appear until later in the film when our good old buddy Karl appears before our main character in his war strategist uniform that is simply based off of a Nazi uniform.
The Nazis are here. And one of the worst takes about Karl's obvious Gestapo uniform was that Paul Verhoeven must be pro-Nazi instead of, thinking about the movie for 5 seconds.
And yet, meanwhile, the relentlessly aggressive communal bugs that have no goal in mind but the eradication of human life are viewed as sympathetic, something that we should have remorse for killing?
I mean, a little bit. Don't get me wrong, it's fun to kill them. I should know, I did it for Managed Democracy and for Rockin' Stone. But there's a reason to feel a little remorse for them if you understand what they symbolize. And it's not the reason this guy thinks it's for.
Why? Well, because they are the other. They are the non-fascist, as we have already defined the fascist in the room. And since they are also, the bugs that is, the out-group, which the modern mind has grown to fetishize to a ludicrous degree, in large part due to the vilification of nationalism, because it is connected to fascism in the same way that fancy clothes are. Thus, we end up in a situation where the person watching this has already determined what fascism is, fancy clothing, and thus forces that definition upon anything that has fancy clothing, because they don't actually understand anything else about fascism. If your definition of fascism is literally good uniforms and militarism, then yes, by that definition, the Federation is fascist.
This man is a lost cause. I have never seen anyone get propagandized to so hard in my entire fucking life. What a fucking cog. A cog that wishes to keep the machine he knows zip about going. Sweet liberty, I need a blackout stout.
Fun and not at all dystopian cameo for screenwriter Ed Neumeyer. Also, according to Twitter Big Brains, not at all a sign of a fascist society that he was arrested, convicted, and sentenced in less than 24 hours.
Oh, and I suppose speedy justice, also fascism. Now, admittedly, this could absolutely be a sign of an authoritarian regime, no doubt about it. Having somebody be arrested and then executed within 24 hours could absolutely be abused, duh. But it could also be a sign simply of a speedy justice system. If somebody is seen shooting someone on the street, everybody saw it, there's tons of witnesses, there is video evidence, yada 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 yada, then do we really require 6-month-long trial eating up unfathomable quantities of public resources? Probably not. And of course, there are obvious problems with this sort of a justice system, duh, but this also is not fascistic.
That would be true if this wasn't a bench trial. Notice how in this scene, there is no trial by a jury, a constitutional right that a democratic state like America, the system that this movie is trying to parody, gives to American citizens under the 6th Amendment. But other than that, you do bring up a good theoretical point to a speedy trial. Too bad there isn't a jury. There are only 3 judges here.
You take a stroll down Washout Lane!
You can just quit? Huh. Expectation subversion. I have to assume when you completely militarize your society, you don't need conscription and might as well only keep the people who can really hack it.
And another point of you really should be noticing by now that this isn't fascism. Yes, that is right. At any point, you can choose to leave Federation service. Whenever the hell you want. You can simply just leave with no consequences whatsoever other than that you cannot reapply for citizenship.
Oh yeah, that's not such a bad thing if you think about it. You can just walk out and not have the rights a citizen has at all. And return to civilian life without any democratic rights whatsoever. But at least you come back in one piece, for the most part.
I skipped the scene where he pointed out the disabled veterans previously, because it kind of rolls into this point. But the reason why there are disabled veterans at the recruitment desk and why Ratchak as well is a disabled veteran is in part to discourage people from joining up. It is to show them front and center these are the potential costs of federal service. In fact, in the movie and the book, Rico says that Ratchak is not using the classroom as a recruitment ground. In fact, he is discouraging them. And do you actually believe that a highly militaristic society would have completely voluntary military service that you could leave at any time? Come now.
Hey, look at that. He's got something right that I mostly agree with to some extent. Yeah, there are veterans out there who show off disabilities as a means of discouragement and warning for unknown civilian kids to make sure if this is what they really want. Any veteran would want to make sure of that for any new recruit because war has a price to pay. Shit gets rough, but we will see how much of a big deal that small gesture is made later on in the movie. Like when they allowed a disabled man by the name of Ratchak return to the field with a bionic arm. A piece of futuristic technology made so that the people can always serve the system no matter what disability, which is only made possible due to the sci-fi aspect of this film. And also, yes, a highly militaristic government would totally let you discharge yourself at the cost of your rights as a citizen. They will give you citizenship if you devote yourself to the system during and after your service, as proven by, oh look, Ratchak! Hey look, it's the definition of fascism.
A political philosophy, movement, or regime, such as that of the fascisti, that exalts nation and often race above the individual and that stands for a centralized autocratic government headed by a dictatorial leader, severe economic and social regimentation, and forcible suppression of opposition.
Oh boy, that's crazy.
Violence is integral to their culture. The Lava Lamp cast is fun and a quick way of showing us that serious injuries for us aren't a big deal in this world.
And as a little bit of a side point, yes, this is also sort of kind of correct. Violence is not integral to their culture, it is integral to the military in which they are currently in.
Hold it! Didn't you say that violence is a supreme authority from which all governments derive from? How a policeman in power holds his authority due to his violent use of force. And now, you say that it's only applied to the military and not the culture itself.
All authority stems from force, from violence. This is the fundament of our entire system. The police force uses authority in that they are capable of wielding force. Our legal system is underpinned by the implicit threat of force. If you break a law, force will be used against you to make you abide by the law and suffer the consequences for breaking.
Well, make up your mind, Archcast. Or are you trying to jumble the wrinkles in my brain into a thought pasta just to throw me off to get me to agree with you? Do you have double standards of the government you claim is innocent? Or do you even believe what you're saying?
Order! Settle down, Shard, and let the man speak his piece.
And yes, the drill sergeants are able to do extreme things to the recruits because they can fix it up.
I guess we can all come to agreement on that, thanks to the futuristic technology they have.
Breaking a recruit's arm is a fantastic way of informing him that you're not as tough as you think you are. And if they can do it without any long-term consequences, in fact, it is literally fixed till lunch, well, that's a wonderful way of teaching a very valuable lesson that will stay with the recruit for a very long time.
Wait. What?
Your Honor, this man knows nothing of boot camps. You are not legally allowed to physically harm your subordinates in boot camp as a drill sergeant. It can be categorized as assault, and the subordinate of the assault has the right to speak with the proper authority to speak on such violence. As the son of a veteran, I can confirm this thanks to my father's stories of boot camp, and I have your source right here, Your Honor, straight from the Army Study Guide. Link in the description. Didn't your mother ever tell you not to believe everything you see in movies? Your Honor, the only reason why this drill sergeant here was able to break the man's arm was to essentially flex his physical prowess to his subordinates, as well as abuse his rank as a high-class officer, all disguised as a means to teach them a lesson. And he puts value in his lesson through the means of violence and force. After all, when someone questioned these exercises and methods, they were immediately met with violence, as well as a hypothetical that will not apply to the battles that we will see coming up. You could argue that Carmen has used the knife, sure, but it is not a one-for-one scenario that our drill sergeant instructor Zim has laid out. Another thing, the only reason why he's allowed to get away with it is because of the advancement of medical technology, which is a waste of resources that could be applied on the battlefield. It's like if you were to do the dishes and you try your hardest to do them, but can't scrape the gunk off a pan, and the second you ask a question, you see your father pull out the belt.
Let down on this, son. It helps. I know.
Good guy, Zim? I mean, at least in the context of a totalitarian punitive state.
And the whipping scene. So, I like the way he puts it here. In a totalitarian punitive state. As if our modern-day states aren't punitive.
Alright, fair. They kinda missed the mark on the definition of punitive there. Kinda, but you live and learn. It's not really something I'd make a big deal of.
In fact, I would argue that our modern-day states are significantly more punitive than the Terran Federation. Okay, so murder carries the death penalty. Fair enough. But in this case, what is Rico guilty of? He is guilty of negligent homicide, or involuntary manslaughter, because he orders a man to take off his helmet during a live-fire exercise, which results in the recruit placed under Rico's command dying.
Yeah.
In fact, this is probably worse than negligent homicide.
Correct.
Now, normally, that carries in our society a sentence from everything between 1 to 6 years in jail.
Holy shit, it's like 2 years and a $10,000 fine here in Texas. What the hell? Longer if you used a weapon or dangerous instrument, and even longer if you already have 1 or 2 cases of these felonies prior. That's crazy. And 6 years? Yeah, that's reasonable for Rico to serve. It could be longer too, ranging from 4 to 8 years, in fact, here in the US.
And Rico gets away with 12 lashes. What is the more humane punishment here? 12 lashes, which teaches you a lesson you will never forget, and then no one ever talks about it ever again. It is done, your punishment is over. It is never mentioned to Rico at any point thereafter. Or 6 years in jail, and probably a permanent mark on your record for manslaughter.
Well, that would be the 4 to 8 year prison sentence, of course. It is fair time for the crime. That's just the justice system at work.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but I'll take the lashes any day of the week.
Ladies and gentlemen and everyone in between, welcome to the part of the video where I had to do a double take the first time I heard these words uttered from this man's mouth. Excuse me, what? We are speaking from the standpoint of the jury, right? The justice system people have a right to, right? We aren't speaking from the convict standpoint, are we? Are we? There is so much wrong with this. My guy, Rico is a fully grown man enrolled in his planet's military. If he wants to enter the world of adults, then he should be convicted as an adult, not given the equivalent to a slap on the back for the crime of getting someone killed in a live fire training exercise. The man deserves a stain on his permanent record, but of course, they won't give him that. He's part of the Terran Federation military. They gotta deliver swift and barbaric punishment to ensure that they have a chance of keeping an able-bodied man enlisted so he can play his role as more meat for the grinder. And they know that if he decides to leave, he doesn't get access to his citizenship rights whatsoever. So there is nothing the Terran Federation could lose because Rico is nothing but a cog that will keep the system working no matter his choice at this boot camp. But you speak on behalf of the fucking convict. What are you trying to prove here, man? You have proven that you sympathize more with a murderer and feel no remorse for the life he took and found it suitable for him to take lashings like a fucking slave in the 1600s? Now that's imagery, FYI, but you couldn't tell, could you?
And this is the main reason Buenos Aires is destroyed, which is pretty crazy when you think about it.
I'm not entirely sure about the logic here. I'm presuming that what he's meaning is that because the Roger Young collided slightly with the asteroid, it moved the asteroid in such a way that it struck Buenos Aires instead of its intended target, which I believe has been stated to be Geneva, in which case, okay, but, I mean, I feel like the main reason was because it was fired at Earth by bug plasma to begin with, but quibbles, I suppose.
Actually, it's because the comms on that starship were cut off, leaving the crew with no way to relay to Earth that a giant meteor is heading towards Buenos Aires. Actually, now that I think of it, we've traveled back and forth from Clondathu. How have we not noticed this meteor earlier? Also, why did humans decide to wage war on bugs when the meteor hit rather than Mormon colonists got mauled on one of the planets? I'll tell you why. Because the Terran Federation is waiting for a huge atrocity to hit the biggest, most major planet we inhabit. Because there's nothing like a good old atrocity to keep a war going. And why wouldn't they want to keep the war going? The government is ran by veterans who use Federation service as a means to give the civilians citizenship. War is a machine that the vets keep feeding more and more bodies to, because if they have something to fight against, they still have their power.
Good guy Zim. I mean, at least in the context of a militarized Warhawk state.
I feel like I need to rip off the counter joke here, because we've got quite a few scenes here where it goes like, well, this is clearly a militaristic, fascistic Warhawk state, as Sim is ripping apart official state documents with the permission of his superior officer, who turns around and goes, yeah, I don't care. See, again, this is why an actual understanding of what fascism is so important, because fascism worships the state, it worships the system. That piece of paper is supposed to be worth more than Rico's life and his career, and yet everyone involved in this scene is completely disregarding of the paper, simply going, yep, that never existed, rip tear, there you go. This is not fascism.
Let's add some context here for that, because throughout this argument, Arch here doesn't explain what those papers are actually for. Those papers are Rico's resignation from the military. These men in particular have stated in a prior scene that they would rather not lose more able bodies due to the mistake Rico made. So in hopes of keeping him, they gave him lashings rather than subject him to the bench trials that await him back home.
Sergeant, we've already lost 2 recruits over this incident. Think there's any possibility of salvaging this man?
Yes, sir, I do.
All right. We'll try administrative punishment.
Too bad he doesn't want any more of the military until the meteor hits Buenos Aires. A good old atrocity that motivates Rico to keep fighting, and that benefits the men who wanted to keep him in the military to begin with. They see this as their opportunity to bend the rules for the sake of continuing the fight through Rico, since they saw a lot of potential in him in a prior laser tag training scene.
Kid's got some moves.
Give him a squad, see what he can do.
Much like how a Warhawk would do, using the fury Rico holds for the bugs as fuel to keep him in the fight. That is the definition of a Warhawk. And if you don't believe me, here's the definition right here. Source in the description. What point are you making here? You were leaving out context from the film. This still benefits the government as it provides them with more meat for the grinder. And it's what makes Rico compliant with the system. His motivation is to give his life to the Federation and nothing else in order to pursue his goal of total destruction of the enemy. By definition, it is.
Seeing this and still thinking fascism is a very clear indication that people really need to be taught what fascism was, unless we are actually going to start repeating it. Goddamn ironically, if fascism ever re-emerges, which it kind of has, as Winston Churchill was erroneously quoted as saying, as anti-fascism, then a lot of people, cinema wins included, are not going to have the faintest clue what's happening.
I don't think it's a bad idea for people to educate themselves. By all means, if you are watching this video, watch the movie, and feel free to do your own research and come to your own conclusions. Just do it under the educated mind. And don't forget that when you are searching up fascism, do not forget to search up satire so that you don't end up like this guy here.
Frankly, I find the idea of a bug that thinks offensive.
So the fascism doesn't really change debate shows. Okay, good to know.
Just shoot me. Just put me out of my goddamn
Lieutenant! He's just a little out of his mind, sir.
Yes. Fascism does in no way change public discourse or oppress differing opinions, in no way, and it would definitely go out of its way to make sure that publicly broadcasted debates on the war effort has opposing sides. Kill Arch. Kill Arch now!
The opposing sides of the arguments here are a representation of debates on war efforts in media. One that serves as a voice of skepticism, and the other has a narrative that is often pushed by the government media that is meant to dehumanize our enemies and to trick us into believing that there is no more than what's on the surface level of the threats we face. They wish to control the narrative in order to trick people into fighting for causes they don't even believe in.
Insects with intelligence? Have you ever met one? I can't believe I am hearing this nonsense.
You just
this
wait
is the most
a
ridiculous
moment.
conversation I have ever had.
A hive brain.
Brain bugs? Frankly, I find the idea of a bug that thinks offensive.
I would also like to point out how in this entire interview, they really want to emphasize that the bugs are nothing but mindless monsters, considering that the guy on the talk show is the one to speak up louder and to dismiss everything and to just basically spew things out that the people would really want to hear in order to get them to make them want to fight the bugs. They want to completely disregard any diplomatic or scientific means of thinking about their newfound bug enemies in favor of doing nothing but incite violence against them.
You can see that in what we are fighting for and against in the modern day. It's honestly tragic how divided we are. We have to fight through ourselves just to fight the conflict that could pose a threat to us later.
Goodness, thank God there's no such thing as a civilian bug. Extremely convenient.
And on the topic of mild hopelessness, yeah, that's true. There are no civilian bugs. You know why? Because the fascist, authoritarian, absolute war machine dictatorship that you've been accusing the Terran Federation of being is the bugs.
Actually, they are a feral wildlife hive mind controlled by a singular entity, sort of like a queen bee. They only spread through space via their spores, and we have only seen them inhabit their desert planets. Much like how humans have done so as well, evident by the space station ring around the moon.
There is no part of bug civilization that is not aimed at and specialized towards furthering the goals of bug civilization.
We have not seen these bugs even lay a ground attack on a human-inhabited planet whatsoever, yet we are the invaders here. We are fighting the bugs for the sake of colonization, if the slaughtered Mormons weren't proof enough of that already. We are the invasive ones here, trying to liberate our planet in order to sustain our way of life and to spread freedom and democracy across the galaxy. Together, we fight for managed democracy. Sorry, my inner Helldiver came out there. God, I'd love to play that right now rather than watch this shit, but here I am.
Oh, someone's definitely gonna play this clip out of context. War seems bad.
Which leads me nicely on to the next point.
Oh no, this has me worried.
Remember how I said that the modern mind all too often is incapable of conceptualizing a justifiable action? Well, this is it. No, war not bad.
Bruh. Excuse me?
You can argue all you want that war is horrible on a personal level, yada yada, the brutality of it, so on and so on. But if it was not for war, you would be a fascist now.
So are we just going to disregard everything else? Everything that war has brought to us? We're going to disregard the lives lost, the culture, history, and faith that people have lost during our wars for the sake of paying attention to the results of the war? Excuse me, but, are you even human? Have you read a history book?
Waging war can be entirely justifiable.
Okay, there could be some salvaging this. Maybe I'm overthinking.
And entirely necessary.
Okay, yeah, that's a point we could agree on. War isn't much of a good thing for us humans, or for our planet, but it is necessary to maintain our way of life to some degree.
As much, and damn near as often, as it can be the opposite. Defeating Nazi Germany was a good war. Fighting against Attila the Hun was a good war. The Romans subjugating the barbarians was a good thing. The Greeks defeating the Persians was a good thing.
You cannot be serious. Do you know anything of what any of our wars have done to us? The countless lives we lost, the wars that did not need to be fought, the destruction of cultures, cities, homes even, the lives that have been torn apart by bombs, the mental drain and turmoil people have undergone. No, I guess you don't, because in your eyes, war is a good thing. Not a necessity needed in order to protect our values and home. It's all just a game to a man who sits behind a screen talking about a science fiction film. By your definition, the American Indian War was a good thing. The bombing of 2 Japanese islands was a good thing. Sending our troops into a guerrilla war zone is a good thing. The use of child soldiers, the needless deaths of people who didn't want to fight, the capture of a religious group. But you don't care. To you, it's about the results. It's about what we gained and not what was lost. It's not like the world still feels the pains that the wars have left behind, the bombs that are still buried in the dirt, the inhabitable lands that were torched or bombed, the cultures we lost, and the history that faded away in the ashes of hellfire. The discrimination towards religious groups and ethnicities. No. The only thing that matters here is who won, and not what was lost. Because bringing up your hand-picked selection of victories is all you have to show for it. Because it's the narrative that you wanted to write.
We can go back very, very far and find wars that made the world a better place. But in the modern day mind, where again, all we are thinking of is fuzzy shades of black and white, war bad. Even when you are fighting against a genocidal species of space insects that want nothing more than to wipe out humanity.
I want peace. I want you to say psych so badly right now. Please say psych, so that I can feel like I've been baited somehow. So that I can just move on from indirectly speaking to a fucking warmongerer. You know what? I could apply these things to wars outside of reality as well. We have fiction on top of fiction about how war is still bad for humanity, whether we are the aggressor or not. Halo, for example, has 2 instances of tragic wars. The fall of Reach and the glassing of New Mombasa. Humanity was only able to survive while extracting just a sliver of hope that could aid us in the future settings of these games, i.e. Cortana, or the Engineer. But we still experienced a massive loss in life, as well as conflict between ourselves and the rebellion on Reach, the people who took advantage of what might have been their last moments on New Mombasa. Hell, the Spartan program itself is an example of the deeper horrors humanity is capable of. Was that not good enough for you? Alright. How about something a little closer to home? Something I think our good friend Arch here can relate.
Another thing you have in common. I chose this. They're kids, you son of a bitch. And kids are cruel. All people are by nature. They just lose touch with it as they get older. Start thinking they know right and wrong. That's immoral. War crime this, code of conduct that. Kids, you can mold, manipulate into performing all kinds of atrocities. And there's nothing like a good atrocity to keep a war going. That's why I'm shutting you down. You just don't see the bigger picture, do you? Did you think every battle in history was all part of some big old conspiracy? Bullshit! War is just part of who we are. Why fight it? Anyway, none of this will matter in 3 hours. Demand for PMCs is about to skyrocket, like the good old days after 9/11.
And just in case you think I'm exaggerating, we actually move on to hammer this point home.
She died for basically nothing. It was mostly a fluke during a mission that was to use live bait to spring a mousetrap. A sane person would be enraged. A fascist would say, well, he literally says it himself a few minutes later.
It sent hundreds of people like you to their deaths.
Didn't they tell you, Colonel? That's what the mobile infantry's good for. A citizen has the courage to make the safety of the human race their personal responsibility.
And I mean, that's his arc. Ratchak asks if Rico believed in the beginning, and he fully does now. No human cost too great for victory and the destruction of the bugs. And Karl still sucks. He's acting like he's seen some stuff, but Dizzy literally died in Rico's arms. He's seen 90% of his original squad confettied in front of him, and even Carmen risked her own life to fly into the swarmed base. But yes, lecture these two. Real firing you is harder on me than it is on you energy. And it's not just the uniform. Karl starts out as a lighthearted goof. Over the course of the war, he's become a fascist, but it's not hammy or silly. You can see it on his face and in his eyes, hear it in his voice. Sending kids to their deaths takes a toll on humans, or at least
You don't approve? Well, too bad. We're in this for the species, boys and girls. It's simple numbers. They have more. And every day I have to make decisions that send hundreds of people like you to their deaths.
I played you several clips in a row there to illustrate the sheer density of wrong on display here.
That's ironic coming from you.
As, again, the modern mind is incapable of conceptualizing of a justifiable action.
You mean knowingly sending troops to their deaths for a little thought experiment against the bugs? Karl said himself, it's simple numbers. We should know that the number of bugs outweigh the number of humans. We need to keep as many of our kind alive as much as possible to support the war effort more efficiently. At least that's how it should be. But Karl believes that that's all the mobility infantry and pilots are. Nothing but numbers to pit against numbers.
We begin by going, okay, Dizzy dies for nothing. Is that true? No. And how do we know that isn't true? Well, he goes on to say that Rico has now been fully brainwashed, that no human cost is too great for victory and the destruction of the bugs. Yes.
Yeah, Rico has lost so many emotional ties he has to anyone that he actually has a close relationship with. Carmen broke up with him. His parents are dead. Dizzy died. And Karl is nothing more than a commanding officer to him. All the man cares about now is taking down the bugs. And it's not for the sake of his family anymore. It's for the sake of the Federation. He could have still left long ago, but he wanted to resign his resignation because of his parents. But now he's staying for the Federation.
Correct. And that is why Dizzy did not die for nothing. The bugs are genocidal colonialists.
They're the colonialists? Tell me, who was there on the planet first, dude? Who? I'm starting to get the feeling you don't even pay attention to what you're watching at this point. And it's so tiring to listen to something so disgraceful, not to the internet's intelligence, but to cinema as a whole.
The bugs wish to wipe out humanity. If the bugs win, that means the death of every single last human. Every man, every woman, every child.
And there we have it, folks. Behind this glass cage, you can find the specimen of a fully propagandized man. A man who is part of the unenlightened masses. A man who will display obedience while never stepping out of line. Who will blindly swear allegiance and let his country control his mind. I know. I'm cheeky. Archie said some batshit insane stuff here tonight, but at least you understand the dangers of colonialists. They will stop at nothing in order to destroy the opposition, who will put their own in harm's way for the sake of a tactical advantage. Now, if only you knew who to point your finger to.
That is why, definitionally, no cost is too great for victory, because defeat means extermination. And if anyone would sit down for 2 seconds and rub a pair of neurons together, this would be blindingly self-evident. And yet again, in the hazy black and white fog of the modern mind, they simply do not combine into a complete thought.
I am so tired of these fossils emerging from the grounds they were buried in to come and tell the next generation how they got it all wrong. Your heads are too far up your own asses to come up with anything of moral value. You want us to rage against the foreign threats you claim hurt us, when little do you know that the thing that hurts us the most The thing we should rage against is the fucking machine.
Even then going on, of course, to attack Karl, saying, "Oh, who is Karl? He hasn't seen anything. Is he lecturing these two combat veterans?" Karl is a bigger veteran than both of them. Karl is a part of intelligence. Karl has seen thousands, hundreds of thousands, possibly millions of people die. He has seen warfront after warfront lost. He has seen entire civilian population centers slaughtered to the last person. He knows that if they do not win, that is the end of humanity.
Karl graduated the same year as Carmen and Rico. He immediately got the position he was in to be a war tactician. I doubt he's seen any real action and wasn't behind a screen or projector. If he ever was, there's no proof in the movie. Where was his combat experience? Where are his battle scars? As a matter of fact, where is your source, Arch?
My source is that I made it the fuck up.
Yeah, that tracks.
Which is why, yes, when he sends the squad onto such a mission, that is necessary. Command requires absolute proof that the bugs are intelligent, because you do not wage war on an intelligent species in the same way you do an unintelligent species. This will change the entire strategic command and directive of the entire Terran Federation war effort, which is why they have to be sure. They must be sure.
So they send troops in as live bait for confirmation, despite the fact that we know that they have live specimens to study on. If they have the specimens and have no issues with using living humans as bait, why not use death row prisoners? After all, nothing has stopped our government from using our prisons as a business industry before, so why not take it to the 8th degree here? Considering the country is ran by veterans here, I'd say it would probably be a political act, or to maybe weed out anyone unworthy of Senate if anyone chooses to run for Senate. But that's a tinfoil hat theory, but not an impossibility compared to this guy saying Karl has seen some shit. Here's an interesting fact I'd like to share with you, the audience, and the other guy on screen here. I've had time to actually ponder this while at work, and I've noticed that the amount of screen time given to the main trio of pals here kinda has a bit of significance. In a way, the amount of screen time they each get is equivalent to how involved they are to the actual battles themselves. Rico is a ground troop. He sees all the action, and he makes the calls when it comes to leading his troops. Carmen is a Starship pilot, whose job is to deliver the troops to the destination of the fight, which still puts her in a line of fire against the bug's defense system. Karl is the man who pulls the strings behind the scenes, the higher up who chooses where the ships go and what the jobs of the troops are. He does it all from the comfort of a planning room and has little involvement on the battlefield itself. Just some food for thought.
Because they cannot afford another Klendathu. This is not Karl moving from being the silly goofball kid into a Nazi. This is Karl moving from being the silly innocent teenager that cannot understand that the world is real, that hardship is real, that the enemy is real, and that there are actually enemies out there that wish to kill you, and into someone who understands that, who realizes that you are not safe in Buenos Aires, you are not safe aboard your spaceship, you are not safe in your bed. If the bugs win, you and everyone you've ever known and cared for will die.
It takes one man to plan out an attack, but it takes the attackers themselves to make that plan come to fruition. No one was in danger on Earth until the meteor hit. The only normal people who were ever in danger from the bugs on a ground level were the Mormon settlers, and they were on their own planet. Karl had life, charm, and wit to him when the movie started. Now he's cold, authoritative, and he's making plans behind the scenes that he knows will kill the troops for his own tactical benefit. In a way, he is still that dumb kid who isn't thinking about preserving humanity, but who is thinking about killing his enemy.
And when you realize that, it becomes a lot easier to send people to their deaths because you know what the alternative is. And this is also why this next scene is so important.
It's afraid. It's afraid!
You have to love it. Fear, the ultimate goal.
Yes, fear is important. Because up until this point, Karl and intelligence had pretty much assumed that they were boned. That they were completely screwed.
It's the ultimate confirmation for humanity that these bugs do think, that they are intelligent species. The public have been set to believe that these bugs are nothing but mindless brain-eating machines. Hell, it's taught in their schools, for cry it out loud. But behind the scenes of the battle, they have confirmation that the bugs do indeed think, that they are intelligent species, contradicting all that they knew up until this point. But they see it as it is in the moment, an ultimate victory over the race we chose to eradicate from their home world. But that's not going to do much to unpropagandize a lot of people who want to go in just to kill these bugs.
But now they know that their enemy is afraid. Their enemy is worried that they can be beat, which gives Karl hope. That's why he's happy for it. Not just because he's enjoying the fear, but because this is probably the first hope that the Terran Federation has had since Klandathu. An enormous shake-up of the Terran Federation, as, interestingly enough, the Cinema Wins forgot or neglected to mention the fact, of course, that there is accountability in the Terran Federation. The Sky Marshal steps down, seemingly voluntarily, after the Klandathu disaster. One of the highest military leaders in the fascist empire takes responsibility publicly and cedes power voluntarily to someone else. Damn, fascism is weird, and honestly, it sounds like a much better system than we have.
For one, this is a parody of a fascist regime, whose people prioritize the nation above their individual selves in exchange for basic democratic rights. When Arch thinks of someone calling the Terran Federation fascists, he expects to see the Nazi regime front and center, not a satire or parody of the concept itself that is twisted within the inner workings of democracy. By the way, I'm pretty sure it's standard government practice to have a successor on standby in case a world leader ever has to step down or pass away. It's sort of like a vice president, or sort of like how when the funny Mustachio Man died, there came another man who ruled for a brief period in Germany called Karl Donitz. I am not sorry if I pronounced that wrong, by the way.
And what it is a film about fascism. Director Paul Verhoeven and writer Edward Neumeier have both said so multiple times. It's not up for debate. It was their intent, and they executed it with the precision of Ratchek putting a trooper out of his misery.
But yet again, we arrive at the media literacy test. See, here's the thing. If somebody tells you that they have made a movie about a kitten living a happy life purring away in the forest as a form of ASMR, and then you open the video, and it's actually a video about a giant dude in a mask made of human skin tearing apart teenagers with a chainsaw, do you still think that it's a video about a goddamn kitten because the person who made it told you so?
Buddy, that is just a straight-up definition of false advertising. The amount of stretching here reaches so far that I'm pretty sure he could touch the spacecraft of another intelligent life form out there.
It's idiotic. Well, the director says it's fascism. The director knows nothing more about fascism than you quite self-evidently do.
I feel like I'm watching a man speak into a mirror. Way to discredit someone who's lived next to a military base of a fascist regime. Someone who has heard bombs go off near their house before and hoping that none of them ever came his way, especially at an early age. If he knows nothing about the regime he lived under, then I guess I know nothing about the war on terror and the events that led to it. I guess nothing major happened in 2001, right? Fucking jackass.
And I'm sorry if I'm sounding a bit mean on this, because I don't necessarily want to, because this is understandable, right? No one knows what fascism is today, and that is, again, a genuine goddamn problem, because, once more, if fascism does arrive in, I don't know, perhaps, let's say...
And as someone who is against fascism, even anti that word,
Yeah, that. The, actually violent, thuggish movement that has carried out straight-up street executions against political opponents. The political opinion, right, that has claimed areas of sovereign nations for their own. That movement seems awfully fascistic indeed. But again, if you have no idea what fascism is, it might just slip you by. Like a few other things might.
You are absolutely right about that, sir. Absolutely correct about no one knowing a thing about fascism. Bravissimo. If they listen to you, that is. I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sure we have the history books and the qualified educators to help show us what lies within human history. The horrible wrongs mankind has brought onto this world, the reasons why it happened. We teach these things to educate the next generation so that we don't let history repeat itself. Has that stopped history from repeating itself? Not always. But even when we aren't subjected to the cold classrooms and flawed educated systems and terrible school lunches, we still have a means to educate ourselves in the palm of our hand. To you, the viewer, I would like to encourage you to please do some of your own research, whether it be from a physical book or from a digital article. We live in an age where information is at our beck and call. Don't just sit and listen to garbage like this. Make your own decisions. Come up with your own thoughts and conclusions, and make sure it's from a credible source too, by the way. I know schools will tell you that Wikipedia isn't a good source, but it's a push in the right direction for the most part. Most information on history there is actually pretty valid, and if needed, try to cross-reference with actual articles if you can find them. I've left all my sources in the description, so feel free to cross-reference me and tell me in the comments what I got right and what I got wrong. Most things I got from Wikipedia were mostly things that were front and center, but read them for yourselves. You may find them interesting. Knowledge is power, and contrary to what this guy believes in, the pen is mightier than the sword. Edward Bulwer Lytton, I think. Okay, we're almost done here. Jeez, it's been a doozy reading this script. I wonder what the closing statements are for both of our subjects.
And look, I don't want to get all Buenos Aires truther on you, but how did the bugs actually throw that asteroid? And so accurate from across the galaxy? And if it was in response to the Mormon settlers, how did it get to Earth in less than a couple million years? They strap FTL drives to those things? I'm not saying anything here, but someone might want to check the serial numbers on those bug asteroids. I'm just saying. Is this the flag of peace lovers, or is that false? You didn't hear it from me. Even if we take the asteroid attack at face value, a genocidal ground invasion still makes no sense, especially when the entire war effort is portrayed as defensive and the humans are in arachnid space. With the orbital defense grid, there should be no more fear of the bugs. They don't have spaceships. There's a reason the Federation is attacking, and it's not about protection, it's expansion. I'll stop there, but if you just connect a few dots, there are myriad reasons things happen the way they do, and by and large, it's not whatever Rico or possibly even Karl think. But I'd never blame Zim or Ratchek. That type of stuff is way above their pay grade. Maybe Hank.
Yeah, like, this is just... I think this... Cope is actually... Yeah, no, cope is the word that comes to mind.
Oh, he's still going. Well, I blew my load too early. Alright. Let's see what this dude who is high off his copium and his own farts has to say about Cinemawin's statement here.
No, the bugs do have spaceships.
What?
The bugs do have FTL technology.
Where?
We know this for an absolute fact, because the bugs are invading other planets.
Say psych right now! No, I genuinely mean it. Say psych right fucking now. Did you even do your research? Did you watch the movie? They are fungal, dude. They spread their spores throughout the vacuum of space. It's a survival instinct similar to that of an actual toadstool. You can't be serious, right, man? Come on. You're joking. You're fucking with me.
Karl mentions it.
Where? What's your source? I watched this movie twice before writing the script, and we have no confirmation of this.
The other troopers mention it.
Now I know you're fucking with me. Now I know. I know you're trying to get into my head. Ah!
The war is not happening just on Klandathu. Obviously, the arachnids can move across the galaxy.
Get out of my brain. You're sucking my brain.
And if we look deeper into the setting, we in fact realize that the bugs have transport ships.
Where? The book? If this is the book again, then shut the fuck up right now. This is a film adaptation. This is a discussion that takes place in the world and context of the first film of Starship Troopers. If there is anything else that has happened in the sequels, then that completely goes against the vision of the original, especially considering the directors were changed. It's like saying Megamind 2 is a valid sequel that adds and complements the original vision of the original movie, and we know we all do not want that shit.
that they can fire bug meteors from via bug plasma. And even then, it is difficult for the bugs to do this. It is something that requires tremendous effort, and therefore is not something that happens very often, but obviously the bugs can move.
Yeah, they can. Just not by the methods you were lying to us about.
To go like, it must be the Federation who's being evil, instead of assuming that the bugs have spacefaring technology that we haven't seen, is ridiculous. And no, a ground invasion of Klendathu is the only choice, because you cannot simply trust in any defensive grid to keep you safe.
I put on a tinfoil hat for this video, but this shit is insane. Way off the deep end, almost some flat earther type shit.
I mean, God help you. Just imagine the situation. There is a thing that is trying to kill you, that is trying to kill millions of you. Would you be like, oh, well, we're just gonna let that thing exist. We're just gonna let it be there. We've got this automated system that'll probably intercept most of the stuff they throw at us. And again, at this point, the Terran Federation views the bugs as goddamn animals to be exterminated because they don't think they can negotiate with them, which they can't. And since they can't negotiate with them, the only way to stop them from shooting meteors at Earth is to destroy the source of the meteors, which is the enormous asteroid belt around Klendathu.
Oh, so we're going for the meteors, huh? Right. Blame the weapon, but not the wielder, huh? You know what? I will humor you for a second. I will fight the bugs myself. I think the better tactic would be one of two options. One, quarantine containment to ensure the bugs are nothing more than wildlife that live under human control. Or two, complete extermination of the bugs. Take their hive mind and you have them wrapped up between your fingertips. And while you're at it, I propose that R&D create a new weapon for mobile infantry. Automatic shotguns. These babies can cover a wide area of effectiveness. If the bugs want to get up in your face, well, that leaves more pellets for them to chew on. Be sure to aim for their legs too. Their exterior seem to be covered and protected by their exoskeleton, meaning their nervous system will be harder to hit. Aim for their legs. That's what you want. And a mobile enemy is a dead enemy, so make sure that they don't have the means to get to you in the first place. There. You have my inner warmonger on display. And let me stroke myself off for once, just to say that it's a way better plan than focusing our valuable military expenses and resources on rocks. Now then, for real this time. Let's make our parting words.
I think it vastly succeeds as both, but feel free to disagree. After all, figuring things out for yourself is the only true freedom anyone has. Yeah, sorry, there's no way I'm ending on a quote from a fascist. Fascists suck and war sucks. As Howard Zinn said, war itself is the enemy of the human race.
I don't know what is. No, actually, you don't get to make up your own mind. You don't get to have that freedom. You will agree with my opinion on things. Otherwise, well, things might get violent. I adore that. I love it. Even admitting, it's like, oh yeah, this is pretty good advice. And then like, no, this is clearly fascistic. Absurd. But admittedly not as absurd, as then ending with war itself is the enemy of the human race in a movie where the human race is being exterminated by arachnids.
A war on foreign land that we are choosing to dive into without any sense of preservation for our returning troops.
Oh God, help me. See, for the umpteenth time, this is my point. The modern-day mind seems fully incapable of understanding and rationalizing anything with which it has not already been pre-programmed.
Fucking bite me, you brainwashed idiot.
The sentence, war is bad, is a pre-programmed one that takes into consideration nothing surrounding that sentence, and thus you can say that war itself is the true evil, even when humanity is being genocided by aliens.
Read a fucking history book for once. Watch veteran documentaries. Look up the propaganda or the bloody battles that took place during the bloodiest wars. Cold War would have probably resulted in the eradication of so much human life if it were to escalate any further. Oh, who am I kidding? This guy won't listen. He'll just keep spinning his narrative just so he can make his own mustard gas smelling points that he loves to smell the stench of. But you can listen, and listen well. No one wants war. It's a hellish thing that brings devastation across nations, even to the homelands. But try as we might to not fight as many wars as possible, sometimes we have to get our hands dirty for the sake of protecting our homes and our beliefs. Don't ask for war, and do not encourage. Try your best to diplomatically solve things, but be ready for when the time comes to do what you have to do, if you are willing to do it. But let's hope it doesn't have to come to that.
The Japanese have an interesting term that goes something like this: Heiwa Byo, or peace sickness in English. It refers to the idea that if humanity is allowed to remain at peace, fluffy, fat, warm, and isolated for too long, it becomes a sickness, a disease of the mind. And God help me, but stuff like this makes me think the Japanese had a very good point. Until next time, I've been Arch. Thank you all very much for watching, and I do hope to see you all again soon. Have a good day.
I've tried for way too long and could never find the Japanese saying that Arch is talking about. All I could find is the Chinese definition on how troops in China are inefficient in combat due to the lack of actual field experience. Hey Arch, I want to ask you once more. Why don't you cite that saying with a source?
My source is that I made it the fuck up! How do you keep finding me?
Of course it is, you slimy bastard. Holy shit. He's doing a fake laugh, and I am done editing this shit. This has probably been the longest video I have ever edited in the entire time I've been here on YouTube. You could go through my playlists, find my old videos, and try to compare. I will say that a lot has happened during the making of this video, and I'm not so sure if this video is even gonna be relevant anymore to this fucking topic, because I've been at this shit for like almost 2 months. But if you made it to the end, thank you so much for watching and giving me an hour of your fucking time. That's absolutely insane. And for the rest of you that are going to contradict me or say that Arch is right or something, everyone's allowed to have an opinion. Opinions are like assholes. Everyone has them. Most people have dick and balls. Go outside and grab a bag. So it's up to you to decide whose ass to kiss. But no, seriously, thank you for coming this far into the video. If I have made any contradictions or missed out on any points, or I have just been yapping on too much, and you just and I just seem to have missed the mark in some points, then please do tell me in the comments below. That would be very nice, and it would help me improve on stuff like this. Unlike my last video that was on Pal World, this one actually had a script, so I had a lot more time to organize this, and it's also another factor into why this video took so long to fucking make. Oh, and by the way, I'm not just leaving my fucking sources down in the description below. I'm gonna leave some videos down there that are actually way better than this one, and that are also informative about the differences between Starship Troopers, or the intricacies of it. And when I'm talking about the differences of Starship Troopers, I'm talking about the difference between the film and the book, obviously. I know a lot of people in the audience are probably asking, or, you know, just screaming at me, telling me that I am leaving out the fact that the book has stuff like Rico being a Latino, and Dizzy was a man in the books, you know? That would have really got him. I'm not gonna change anything about the video. It's already too late. I'm done making this shit. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Expect something fun next time. I definitely got something fun planned. But for now, I'm gonna work on a bunch of art and stuff like that. So yeah, that's pretty much about it. See ya. Typical contrarian YouTuber. All talk, but no substance.
What?
War is a good thing. We don't know fascism. Violence is the supreme authority. What a load of bullshit! All you care about is writing your own narrative. that, and your view count! You got no principles, just like all the rest. If media literacy has gone to shit, you're just another maggot crawling in the pile. Yep, that's how I've been feeling these past few months.